All right, so here's Module 5, Lesson 13 homework. We were continuing working with placing numbers on a number line to compare them. Today we worked with fractions greater than 1. So back in the day, perhaps when you were in school, you would look at 3/2, 9/5, 14/10, and the term we were taught was an improper fraction. Remember, improper means there's something wrong with it, and there's nothing wrong with these fractions. They're just fractions greater than 1. Okay, so the number line we're looking at now is 1, 1.5, and 2 instead of 0, 1/2, and 1. So the big thing that the kids need to realize when they're doing this is that the distance from 1 to 2 is the same as it was from 0 to 1. You're still going one distance. So when we look at these fractions, we have to break them out into a whole and then look at the part that's left over and be able to place that part and just imagine that this is 0, 1/2, and 1. Okay, so I'll show you what I mean. So we look at 3/2, we make our number bonds. We do a circle. We have 2 parts to a whole, so we make one whole, which is 2/2. And so then 3 minus 2 is 1, so we have 1/2 left. So if we look at this, we have our 2 over 2, which equals 1 whole, so we're starting here. So now we're going 1/2 distance, so we go from 1 to 2, we're going 1/2. So 3/2 will actually be in the same place as 1 and 1/2, because 3/2 equals 1 and 1/2. So if we look at our 9/5, we have 5 parts to a whole. So our whole is now going to be 5/5, and then 9 minus 5 is 4. So the other part is going to be 4/5. So we start at 1, which is our 5/5. So we pretend that this is 0. So now we need to move 4/5. And we know 4/5 is greater than 1/2 because half of 5 is 2.5, and 4 is greater than that. So 4/5 is going to be up here somewhere. So our 9/5 goes here. Okay, and now we look at our last one. We have 14/10. So we do 10 over 10 because we have 10 parts to our whole. And so then 14 minus 10 is 4. So we have 4/10 left over. Our whole would be 10 over 10, so that's where we started our 1. And then 4/10 is going to be less than 1/2 because 5/10 equals 1/2, and 4/10 is less than 5/10. So our 14/10 will actually end up right here. Okay, so now we're looking at the number line here, 1 and 1/6 compared to 1 and 4/12. If we look here, we know that 1/6 is going to be very close to 1, whereas 4/12, if we divide the top and bottom by 4, that's going to equal 1/3. Thirds are larger than sixths, so that is 1 and 1/6 is less than 1 and 4/12. Here, 1.5 compared to 1 and 4/5. Well, we already figured out that 4/5 is greater than 1/2 because half of 5 is 2.5, so we know that 1.5 is less than 1 and 4/5. All right. The bottom here, they changed it up a little bit. They added extra hash marks here, which would be, if we look, we're still going one space, so that's going to be a quarter, a quarter, a quarter, and a quarter, because we broke it up into fourths. So we now have 1 and 1/4, and this would be 1 and 2/4, 1 and 3/4. So I would have the kids label that just so they can have that visual and see it. These ones we're going to have to break it up and move them around a little bit and compare it to different fractions to see where they would end up. So if we look here, we have 12/9, so we have 9 over 9, which is our whole. 12 minus 9 is 3, so we have 3/9 left. We know that if we divide 3/9 divided by 3 over 3, we would get 1/3. So we have 1 and 1/3 here. Is 1/3 larger or smaller than a fourth? It's a smaller number, so that means it's going to be larger, and we know it's going to fall in between a fourth and a half. So this is where 12/9 will go. Okay. 6/5, if we break that up, we're going to have 5/5 as one whole, and then 6 minus 5 is 1, so we have 1/5 left over. So we started our whole. 1/5 we know is smaller than 1/4, so we can put our 6/5 here. And then 18/15, I'm going to move these up here. We're going to have 15/15 as our whole. 18 minus 15 is 3, so we have 3/15, which is left over. And then we have to determine how can we compare this to anything down here. Well, if we look, we could convert 15ths into fifths by dividing by 3. So if we divide by 3 over 3, we get 1/5. So 18/15 is actually 1 1/5, which is the same as 6/5, which is 1 1/5. So right here in the same spot, we are going to have 18/15. Okay? So now use the number line in problem 3 to explain the reasoning you used when determining whether 12/9 or 18/15 was greater. So let's determine that 12/9 is greater than 18/15. And so basically the part you're going to look at is we know we have a whole in both of them. We have 9/9 and 15/15, and what is left over once we reduce them down is 1/3 and 1/5, and we know that 1/5 is larger than 1/5, or 1/3, excuse me, is larger than 1/5. So that's why that number falls on the number line later as a greater number. It's kind of confusing. There's a lot of looking back and forth between multiple numbers, but it's just how it goes. And I had the talk with the kids today that, fractions like this, it's not just black and white like addition or subtraction. You actually have to think pretty critically, comparing fractions. We have lots of fraction charts all over the room for the kids to compare, and many of them were using them to show that, say, 5/6 was larger than 3/4 because they were able to show me by using some fraction strips that 5/6 is larger than 3/4. So, okay, we go to the back. We do not have the number line. A lot of these, you're just comparing one that's less than 1 and one that's greater than 1. So compare the fractions below, writing greater than or less than on the lines, then give a brief explanation for each answer referring to the benchmarks. Readjust that. There we go. Okay. So the benchmarks we're looking at would be 0, 1/2, 1, 1.5, and 2, depending on what fractions we're looking at. So if we look here, 2/5 compared to 6/8, we know that 2/5 is less than 6/8 because I would say 2/5 is less than 1/2 and 6/8 is greater than 1/2. So they just need to write, something. They could just do 2/5 is greater than 1/2 and 1/2 is less than 6/8. So they could just do something like that to show me that they're having an understanding with the benchmarks. They could use words, I don't care, but there needs to be something here. Okay, 6/10 and 5/6. If we look, they're both over 1/2, so we're going to kind of look at distance from 1. So we have 1/6 away from 1, and this one would be 4/10 away from 1, or if we took 4/10 and divided it by 2 over 2, we get 2/5. And so we know that 5/6 is greater than 6/10 because 2/5 is larger than 1/6, which is our distance from 1. Sorry for the poor handwriting. 2/5 is greater than 1/6, which is our distance from 1. So if this one is further away from 1, it's going to be smaller, obviously. Okay. 6/4 and 7/8. 6/4 is greater than 1. 7/8 is less than 1. Easy peasy on that one. 1/4 is less than 8/12. If we want to find an equivalent fraction for 8/12 and divide by 4 over 4, because we can find a common denominator between these two, we would get 2/3, and we know 2/3 is definitely larger than 1/4. 14/12 and 11/6. 14/12 is less than 11/6. 12/6 would equal 2. And so this is very close to 2, whereas this one is just barely past 1. So that's why we know that that one is 14/12 is less than 11/6. 8/9 is less than 3/2 because greater than 1, less than 1. 7/8 is less than 11/10 because greater than 1, less than 1. 3/4 is less than 4/3 because less than 1, greater than 1. Again, 3/8 is less than 3/2, less than 1, greater than 1. 9/6 compared to 16/12, we can go from 6 to 12 by multiplying 9/6 by 2/2, and we get 18/12. And so we know 18 is greater than 16. So we know 9/6 is greater than 16/12. Another way you could look at D, now that I'm thinking about it with the multiplication there, you can take 1/4 and multiply it by 3/3 to get to 12, and that would give you 3/12, and we know 3/12 is less than 8/12. So pretty confusing stuff, but the kids, they need to persevere, and this is a thinking game more than anything right now with them, as they really need to think critically, look at the models in the room that they've created, or find a fraction bar chart online for them while they're doing this so they can see the visuals. And so that's that.